Hi, good evening. I'm Steve from Steve's True History and Knowledge channel. Today I'm going to be doing a presentation on the Ancient Persian Gulf in Africa. So let's just get right into it. On the screen you can see a picture from Jeffrey Rose's book, New Light on Human History. This is a picture of Arabia, ancient Arabia. And it shows the oasis areas in the Persian Gulf and along the Red Sea. I discussed this in the previous video, but I'm going to be going over it more here. And so the darker areas is the area during the droughts. The Persian Gulf would, the glaciers would suck up all the water and drain the gulfs. So these lighter areas are the areas that would dry up and become like an oasis like, and the darker area is where there was still water. So you can see here in the Persian Gulf, you just had this area in the middle that still had water, and then all around it you could walk through. So you can see you can cross, to the other side, to Iran. And then in the Red Sea, you can't really see the southern part in this picture, but I'll show it in a couple more slides. But you see the same thing. Just the middle of the Red Sea still has water, and then the outsides are dried up and became like oasis-like. And then each one of these numbers is an ancient archaeological site where some artifacts have been found. And the thing that we notice here is that in the north, there's no sites. And then we have a series of sites here in the middle. And then we have a series of continuous sites here down at the bottom. So you can kind of see that people were traveling through the middle area, avoiding the deserts here in the middle, and they were traveling around the southern rim of Arabia. And number 22 here is the site Jebel Faya. I want to just mark that for you here on the map where you can see this. This is number 22. We're going to talk about this on the next slide. So Africans around the ancient Persian Gulf. Rose says that the ancient Jebel Faya site, that's the number 22 on the map, on the east coast of Arabia, that we discussed in the prior video, does not have any relationship to the Levant. So the Levant is Palestine, northern Mesopotamia, and Syria. So if we go back to the map, you can't see it here, but it's on the north. So the north, if you're over here in Egypt, you come around the circle, you have a whole bunch of sites, right? You get to Palestine, Syria, you come around, you go into northern Mesopotamia, northern Iran, and you have a bunch of sites all over. It's a heavy populated area in the ancient times, right? But then you have an emptiness below that. And then farther below that, you have other different sites, right? So at Jebel Faya, artifacts called assemblages C were found there, and they are totally unknown to the Levant during the Middle Paleolithic. I'm sorry, but I'm coming off of like a cold or COVID or something, so sorry, I have to clear my throat. This shows us that Jebel Faya was not a migration point from the north of the Levant. He also says that they are not related to Oman either, but that it's suspected that they are from the out of Africa Africans dating from 125,000 years ago or later. Okay, so the out of Africans leaving Northeast Africa and East Africa are crossing and moving into Arabia. And they're crossing here. You can see this is a better picture of the Red Sea. You see down here at the bottom, so the oasis and the water is very thin and small here. It's said to only be like maybe a mile long, a mile width, a mile wide to cross at this time. So it was easily crossable. And then you see the sites 33, 32, 31, 35, 34 right near the Red Sea. So people are coming off Africa, crossing into these southern areas of Arabia. So the Gulf and the Red Sea oasis. Africans from Northeast Africa and the Horn of Africa were crossing the Red Sea into Arabia, passing through the moister mountain regions to the Persian Gulf. Once there, at the Persian Gulf, many remained for many generations, and their tool making evolved with them. Rose states that the Gulf Oasis hypothesis has been around since 1908, mentioned by Pompelli. Drought was a main cause of death and despair for people during the times of the glacial maximums in this region. So glacial maximum is when the glaciers are at their fullest extent and hold the most water. Ancient Arabian DNA. The people would have had to search to find food, water, and other resources which became scarce and caused many to go extinct during these glacial maximum times. Only the M and N DNA haplogroups, which date to about are around about 60,000 years ago, survived. M seems to have moved to Eastern Asia and then back to Central Asia. N is the most frequent haplogroup in Australia and is also found in Malaysia and Indonesia. So, out of Africans, N, well, when they were L3 when they left Africa, and then they evolved to N, and those are the people that made it all the way to Australia, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And that's probably prior to 60,000 years ago. Probably a little bit earlier than that. N and M were not found 100,000 years ago in Arabia, nor was a native with an L3 haplogroup type. This is because L3 is from Outer Africans. So L3 is in around in Sudan area, Sudan, Khartoum, in that area, and they're the ones who left out of Africa and evolved into N and M. So they haven't found any native L3s out of Africa. The Persian Gulf. The Neolithic for Arabia began in the north. From 6000 BCE to 4000 BCE, these people in southern Mesopotamia, or Sumer, were different from the people in Arabia. So we can see Sumer is this green area, circle, at the bottom half of this red circled area. And you got cities like Eridu, Uruk, right? These famous cities. You got Susa, the famous city in Iran. And then on the Iranian plateau over here, it says scattered cities supported by long-distance trade and irrigation agriculture. And then in Arabia, we got desert nomads, and we got cities engaged in maritime trade with Mesopotamia and the Indus. So they have boats and ships here in the Persian Gulf that are leaving and trading with north with Mesopotamia and with India. And then these desert nomads are different people than the people who are here in southern Sumer. Okay. These findings tell us that the people were living around. Oh wait, sorry, I skipped the Levalloisian and Nubian tool making techniques found in Northeast and East Africa are also found on the Arabian side of the Persian Gulf. So number 22, we saw Jebel Faya, which was over here. That's the Arabian side of the Gulf. So these sites around this area, they found Nubian tools and Lavalsian tool techniques that are found in Northeast and East Africa. They're also found in Europe. So they found those here. But the most likely is they came from Africa, not from Europe. Okay, so these findings tell us that people were living around the Persian Gulf 100,000 years ago and came from Africa. The Persian Gulf and the Zagros Mountains. The people of the southern Zagros Mountains of ancient Iran were in contact with the people living around the Persian Gulf. In contrast to the central and northern Zagros Mountains, which seem to have been populated by people coming from the north of the mountains. The modern countries of Qatar and Kuwait were heavily populated from about 12,000 BCE to 4,000 BCE. And the people of the eastern side of the Gulf were the ones who were similar to and in contact with the people of the southern Zagros. As you come out of the water and into the mountains, so as you come out of the Persian Gulf and into the mountains of these southern Zagros, there's like a valley that leads up into the mountains with sites on both sides. Many ancient sites are found along the path. So what does this sound familiar to us? People arriving in the Persian Gulf and going up into the mountains. That sounds like the story of Anu or Nimrod. Okay. The Zagros Mountains. So on our map here, if you see my cursor, or it's actually so this is the Zagros Mountains here in the north part of the map. And here's a lot of ancient sites. We see Susa here, then, and the southern part of Sumer, not southern, western part, Sumer. You have all the Sumerian cities, and then we see the way that trade flows, right? So trade's coming out of Iran and probably from India over here, and then it's coming out of southern Iran over here and coming out of the Persian Gulf, and then it's going up the rivers and then through the Arabian Desert. You see how it keeps going? Down here at the bottom part of the map, this trade is going through the cities of Ur and Uruk, or Tel-e-Ubaid and Uruk right here, and then going west into Arabia. And then you have this other trade route that's going and hitting these more northern Babylon like area. Okay. This area was called, so Zagros Mountain this area was called Susiana. Later it became Susa and finally Elam. So that's here where Susa is at. Levalsian tools have been found in this area. Okay, so those African tool techniques have been found in the Zagros Mountains where Susa's at. Susa's still kind of flat. It's kind of in the mountains, but it's not all the way up into the mountains, and it's right on a trade route. Evidence of two distinct people have been found here. Okay, and then this area was populated 35,000 years ago, and their tool making technique is called aurignation. I don't know if I said that right, but aurignation. Arabia and the Persian Gulf are out of Africa stopping points. Okay, yeah. While traveling, it would have been rare to see any other humans until you come near to some kind of town or village. So, yeah, traveling, the population was sparse at this time. So, until you got to like cities or towns or somewhere, it would be rare that you actually saw anybody if you were traveling a long distance. The population for the world was only estimated to be about 4 million people in 10,000 BCE. It's thought that high in the Zagros Mountains is the most probable center of origin of the aurignation technology and modern humans found in Europe. Okay, so up in the Zagros Mountains, they're saying is the most likely place where Europeans came from. Canoes and boats were used, okay? And during the Holocene period, the people moving into Arabia are coming from the south, same as in Egypt. So Egypt, people are moving from the south, they're moving from Ethiopia, and they're moving from Nubia. And then here in Arabia, the people are also coming from the south. So they're coming from Yemen, they're coming from Oman. Okay. The Arabian region. The Red Sea oasis in between Africa and around Yemen probably had a large population center where people were migrating from. Later, herders began to come from the... Okay, I think that's important. So, you have these oases and just a short distance to get from here, from Ethiopia, or probably actually where you can see Axum at. If Axum becomes like a kingdom, and then it has a big population center, and then you can see here these routes, the trade routes that were used are coming out of Axum. They're not coming, and this is a later map, but trade routes stay the same pretty much forever. I mean, mostly, unless something changes the path, because people usually find a better path and use that path and they stick to it. So most likely there's a big population here in Axum, and then the oasis across on the other side as well, here in the southern part of Yemen, where these other kingdoms are at. And then these are the people, the earlier people, not these same people, but the earlier people that were here are the people that are moving in, to the east and north in through trying to get to the Persian Gulf. So later herders began to come from the northwest. Okay, so then in the north, animals are coming from the north. Different kind of animals. Cattle are already 8,000 BC. Cattle is already in Africa. I don't think goats and sheep are there yet. They come like 1,000 years later. But so they're moving from the north out of the Levant, the sheep and the goats, and they're coming south into Egypt and down the side of Western Arabia. A culture arrived in South Oman from North Byblos. That's very fascinating. I want to research into that. That's the first time I heard that. North Byblos is in like the coast of Israel, right? By Tyre, the famous city Tyre. It's one of the oldest cities, and it's Byblos is um, has a close connection with Egypt and the Egyptian kings and pharaohs. So this culture, it's saying a culture from Byblos arrives in South Oman arrives in South Oman. Africans are bringing plant, seed, and or grass harvesting to the Persian Gulf, Zagros Mountains, and north from Egypt into Palestine. Okay? So contrary to what you normally think is, or you've been taught, is that uh, agriculture started in the Levant. But actually, seed collection, Africans were already going around and collecting seeds from the grasses and making food out of it way before the Levant. Okay, that the above, and if you talk about grasses, wheat, I don't think wheat is a grass or barley is a grass, I'm not sure, but it's very similar to a grass. So the Africans were already collecting uh, that vegetation from the ground already and using it to make food. The above information provides us evidence of a southern route out of Africa as far back as 125,000 years ago and people living in the Persian Gulf. Any sites in the Persian Gulf oasis after 6000 BCE would be underwater now. It became uninhabited from about 22,000 BCE to 12,000 BCE, and then people show up again on the western side. So when Arabia becomes a desert, like no rain for a long time, drought, the people are moving to the Persian Gulf oasis because the Persian Gulf dries out, and then when the rain comes back and the water comes back, they move back into Arabia. The eastern side was empty from 10,000 BCE to 4,000 BCE. So the opposite side, there was nobody there on the around the coast. Okay, shoot. And then what the people were doing on the Khuzestan Plain, which is just northeast of Sumer, from 18,000 BCE to 8,500 BCE, was similar to what the people were doing in Canaan at the same time. 8,000 BCE was probably not called Canaan, but Canaan comes before Palestine, so I just called it Canaan. But Natufian, if you've heard of Natufian, you can just picture early Natufian sites, like Jericho. They're doing the same thing that the people in the southern route. So the northern route out of Africa is coming out of Egypt into Palestine, and the southern route out of Africa is coming through the Red Sea down the southern coast of Oman and Yemen, and both of those, that division of people are similar to each other. Aquatic lifestyle and state formation. Natufian ancestors brought plant seed and or grass harvesting with them into Canaan from Egypt. Demographics change and sedentarism begins in the Gulf about 5500 BCE to 4500 BCE. So in the Persian Gulf. During droughts, both the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf were used as refuge areas. After they flooded, the people moved to the river valleys of Egypt and Sumer. In both locations, the people lived off the water, and it's argued that the aquatic lifestyle during the Middle Holocene played a critical role in state formation in Sumer. For Egypt, this is also seen farther upriver on the White Nile in Khartoum and southern Sudan. So, up there in the White Nile in that area, they had they lived an aquatic lifestyle, so they're living off the Nile for their subsistence. And it was prior to Nubia or Egypt, there was the most powerful, I don't know if Eric calls it a state or if he calls it a kingdom, or just like a civilization. I think he calls it a civilization. He says the most powerful civilization is an aquatic civilization that lives in the upriver on the White Nile in Sudan, like South Sudan area. And that's the same thing that they're saying is in Sumer as well. And then it played a role in state formation. So you got people from Nubia and the Middle Nile who are pushing north into Egypt. Right? They're pushing the Egyptians north, and Egyptians are trying to hold their border, but Nubians are getting through, and they're pushing through. And then they're also spreading east across the Sahara, all the way to the Niger Bend. So from 6,000 to 3,000 BCE, that's what's happening. And that's very, very critical. I'll get into this later, but that's very critical to understand, to get a better grasp and idea of what happened in Egypt, because it's not really what you think it is. We're taught that Nubians are soldiers and slaves. Yeah, they're soldiers, they're warriors, and they're pushing through into Egypt. Okay, the Sumerians and the Kushites. By 5500 BCE, a bunch of sites start to pop up from people within the area. Rose says by 2500 BCE, the people living in Sumer were indigenous Neolithic Ube 3 people who would become known as the Sumerians. Okay, so that's good. That's from Rose is saying these people that are already there in Sumer, the Ube people, are who become the Sumerians. But he just said prior that these Ube 3 and the people on Arabia are most likely out of Africans. Some scholars say the center of their civilization was at Eridu, on a lake at the edge of the Wadi Butin Delta called the Water of the Deep, or Abzu, by the Sumerians. That they were there at about 5000 BC, so they're already there 5000 BC. This is the same time the Kushites on the Red Sea hills of Africa and Egypt, I'm saying this now, and Sudan were expanding south into Djibouti and Ethiopia. And I get that from Eric, Christopher Ehret, professor at UCLA. His expansion of Kushites, if you look at his maps, and you look at his maps in sequence, you can see how first Kushites are expanding out of Ethiopia and they're moving north into Sudan, into the Red Sea hills and into Egypt. And then also northeast into Sinai and Palestine, right? And then they stay on the side. They're on that coast. They're on the western coast of the Red Sea, and for sure they're moving across the Red Sea. Then you see them move. Then you see them shift and move south into Ethiopia, more southern in Ethiopia, and on Somalia, on the coast of Somali, and all of Eritrea and the coast of Ethiopia, Djibouti. That's all them Kushites. And then for sure they're moving across into Yemen, Oman, and even farther into the Persian Gulf. And they actually even spread all the way across the Afro-Asiatic people. Earhart calls them a different people, but they're just a branch. He calls them the Northern Eritreans, and Eritrean is the Red Sea. And then they cross all the way across northern Africa, all the way to almost the edge, like by Morocco. The Ubaid people. They were in contact with the people living at Susiana up the eastern southern Zagros Mountains. The people from Susiana also came down from the mountains and settled in the river valley. Both together created the Ubaid. Okay, so the people that were already down on Sumer, like at Irudu, and then the people of Susiana or Susa, that's the same as where Susa is, are coming down out of the mountains and mixing with them. And then he's saying those are what became the Sumerians, or the Ubaid people. And then the Ubaid became the Sumerians. By 4000 BCE, there was a large population living there, and they began experimenting with irrigation. The Ubaid culture spread south to Qatar, Bahrain, and the Strait of Hormuz. You see that at the very corner of this map. Probably hard to see. I don't know if you could blow it up. Strait of Hormuz is the shortest crossing point from Oman to Iran. Okay, the Neolithic and agglutinative language. The Ubaid people traded with the East Arabian people. Okay, so there's two distinguished people here, the people in the Ubaid and Arabian people now. These people began to manufacture their own pottery. In contrast to the Sudan, independently had already invented their own pottery in between 8,000 and 7,000 BC. So we don't want to conflict these Ubaid or Arabian people's pottery with Sudan's pottery. These Sudan with this early pottery were Nilotic people, meaning they are living along the Nile. They're Nile River people. That's Nilotic people. And they have pottery on the Nile between between these 8,000, 7,000 BCE. The Nilotic people are Nile River people, and their languages are agglutinative languages. Sumerian is said to be an agglutinative language. Okay, so they're both agglutinative languages. Emphasize that point there, okay? They're both speaking this similar, same type kind of language. Maritime networks. The Ubaid people built and used reed boats to navigate up and down the Twin Rivers and the Gulf when the water level was low. Okay, so they had boats. They built a trade network along the waterways from 5500 BCE to 5000 BCE. And in contrast, there was already a maritime exchange network at 10,000 BCE in the Aegean. Pictures in Kuwait of boats with sails on clay art have been found. Okay, so Kuwait is like where Sumer is at, and they found pictures of boats with sails on clay art. Okay, and then so you can see this is a later map, but like I was saying, so you can see here the navigation way uh, trade routes. So sorry, I'm trying to. So from you can see, so they got it split. These are two separate pages. So we got trade route coming through from Greece and um, Asia Minor and through the Red Sea here to Damascus, Syria, through the Red Sea south to Gulf of Aden, around the Horn of Africa to areas on East Africa, and then across through to India and across through to Iran, and then up the Persian Gulf to the Euphrates River, and then across the mountains into all the way to China. So okay. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is they had boats at this early time that the Ubaid period is coming into existence, and the Sumerians are coming into existence. They had boats that they were using, and they were going around from Africa to into the Persian Gulf and through the Red Sea and up into Greece at 10,000 BCE, right? So that's the I want to emphasize that point. And that's it for this one. Here's the bibliography. Jeffrey Rose, of course. Thank you very much for his work. Christopher Ehret, The Civilizations of Africa. Atlas of World Population History. And Past Worlds, Atlas of Archaeology. Thank you for watching. My name's Steve Webb Jr. from San Diego, California. Take care. Have a good night.